Welcome to episode 306 of the Postal Hub podcast. I'm Ian Kerr. My special guest in this episode is Cédric Hervet. He's the Chief Product Officer at Kardinal, and we're going to talk about a whole load of things relating to route optimization, but so much more than just that. It's things like resource management, talking and negotiating with delivery subcontractors, balancing routes and optimizing territories, shall we say. And there's also a bit of a case study seeing how all of this works in the field with DPD France. So, coming up in just a moment, Cédric Hervet, Chief Product Officer at Kardinal. Joining me on the line is Cédric Hervet. Cédric is the Chief Product Officer at Kardinal. And Cédric, we're going to have a discussion about, well, let's call it resource management and dealing with delivery drivers, subcontracted drivers, route optimization, all these sorts of things. And let's start with sort of an overview of the current situation as to how delivery companies, whether they're a private operator or a postal company, how they are managing the relationships and sort of allocating resources. By that I mean whether it's working out whether you're going to have a subcontractor or an employee delivering on a delivery route and those sorts of things.
Well, it's a good question because it's a critical one for postal operators and parcel delivery companies, right? Part of them are actually doing this through subcontractors, right, that are operating deliveries on the field, and some have a mix of internal employees and subcontractors as well. But the most complex thing here is to decide where should everyone go, right? To do it's the really basis of the work, right? Who does what and where, and so. That's for this part. It's what we see is that it's mostly, I would say, done by hand, right? Okay, you may have the support of an Excel sheet, but that's probably the best you get. And so to make such important decisions, and they're important because they are applied repeatedly every day, right? And so if you design a suboptimal and inefficient plan on how to serve a territory, well, the loss of productivity compared to an optimal ideal, I would say, is lost every day, right? And so doing this repeatedly over at the level of a whole nation, right, is the loss is really large. And so what we think here is that they have very little help to make that job efficiently. Today, they really have no or little available data, and if they have some data, it's partly incorrect, and the most important is that they have no clue about how to use it efficiently, because having data is just a prerequisite, right? Doing the most of it is really the goal, and they're not really helped in that regard. So they lack digital tools to really make the most out of their data.
And one of the things we often don't talk about so much is data can be used for route optimization, working out where to turn left, where to turn right, things like that. But it's also about maximizing the load in vans, isn't it? Whether it's a subcontractor or an employee driver, right?
Yeah, no matter what you do, it's true that depending on whether it's a subcontractor or an internal driver, you may think about the constraints when you build a road slightly differently. I mean, you don't have the same objectives really, but the core basis of what you do is to maximize productivity, right? Whatever you do, having the higher productivity under constraints is really the ultimate goal. And so, it reduces to the percentage of the loading rate of the vans. And I mean, the main difficulty you have is that when you are doing post and parcel operations, volumes are too high, and so you cannot really say that you need a stable organization, right, to process all those thousands of parcels every morning. Most of the time, you only discover what you have to deliver the very morning, right, 2 hours before truck departure. So really, you can't say, okay, I will launch a global optimization at this point. I need to rely on some stable structure that will be recurrently applied on the field. It may be optimal is suboptimal, but it also yields some incredible benefits. The fact that, for example, a driver delivers the same area every day, he will know where to park, he will know having the same driver on the same territory every day means you can earn 10 to 30 to 1 minute seconds to 1 minute per delivery. And so in the end, when you have 60 to 80 parcels to deliver, the productivity increase is huge. So
that's a really interesting point about having the driver familiar with their delivery route as being part of this entire balancing act, I suppose. Yeah. And it can't be underrated. Knowing the people you're delivering to, knowing the streets, knowing where you find a parking spot and things like that, you're quite right.
When you're working with subcontractors, I mean, it's also much easier for them to tell, okay, this is your area and you need to get better at this on this area. But the counterpart of it is that this kind of organization was built in a time where most of the activity was highly predictable. It was stable, especially for the parcel delivery industry, where it was mostly B2B at the time. Now, with the rise of e-commerce, you have I would say, a much higher volatility level, right? And so when you try to perform deliveries with a very stable structure that is not meant to change too often, but when you have to deliver highly variable volumes and the variations are really huge, what we see in the data is that on the same sector, if you take, let's say, only Tuesdays, it can vary from 1 to 3, right, in terms of ratio, because just due to seasonality and local stuff that happens, right? And so it's really difficult to size something that will remain stable while to handle something that is highly unstable, I would say. And that's the main challenge of those companies today. And this is why, especially for the subcontractor part, so many subcontractors are going bankrupt, because it's really hard to actually be efficient doing this kind of stuff. And they have no data for it.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. Since there's a lot of postal companies, a lot of private parcel delivery companies have subcontractors out there delivering, and the way they're allocated their contracts may vary a little bit from place to place. But ultimately, there's going to be some kind of a sharing of data before they start. So how can you share the right kind of data with potential contractors so that you're avoiding the problem of them going out of business? Because you don't want to, you know what I mean? You don't want your drivers to go out of business just because they're going out of business, because then you're stuck in that cycle of having to find new drivers and the competition for talent and all of that, right?
There's also a huge driver shortage on the market right now. So it's been, it's really, really critical for them to keep their subcontractors, and especially the good ones. But being good is hard in this job, because even if you have data, data tells you, do not tell you how to do things, right? It can, at best, if you only have data, it can help you check that it works, but it won't give you the solution. So that's part of where we come in with Kardinal. We have something to just, based on historical data, we can help them build optimal setups for their territory that will be both optimized and resilient to change. But that's really what they lack is not data; it's methodology. Right. They need something to make a good decision. And the good decision is really this. You need to find the right balance between having something that will sometimes fail, but for which you can easily find some recovery scenarios. Let's say, for example, you have a route and the amount of parcels generates a tour that is too big, but let's say it does so only 5% of the time. Well, for those 5% days where the quantity will exceed the truck's capacity, or the time the driver can devote to do deliveries. Well, you just pass some parcels to his neighbor that may accept them, and so on. So and that's actually what they already do, right? The only thing is that it happens a lot today, and what we can give control over is the fact that you can have control over the 5%. Should it be 5%? Should it be 10? Should it be 15? And obviously, the more resilient you are, the more conservative you'll be in terms of how many resources you put on the field. There's really a correlation between those two aspects. And so it gives you the price of quality, right? How much does it cost to have something that is very lean, no error every day? The guys have just what they need in the truck, but most of the time it will be half empty, if you set up a too high robustness. So obviously productivity won't be that good. But then if you accept a level of infeasibility for which you have to find solutions on a daily basis when the numbers are too high, well, having control over this is really the hard part, and that's really what we offer here. And it's a new way to work about things, because what they do today with data is, okay, if you pick that zip code and let's say you want to put one driver to deliver that zip code, what is the amount of parcels on average you have to deliver there? And so if it's 80, okay, it sounds like feasible. But if actually it varies between 40 and 200, which is not unrealistic at all, actually, given the real data we have, it may mean that half the time this tool won't be feasible at all. And so that's why it's difficult, right? If you just look at big numbers, average numbers, things may look fine, but in practice they're not. And both the parcel delivery company, the postal company, and the subcontractors, they have no clue today really what to do with the data to be more efficient.
You just mentioned the word efficient, and we've talked about stability and feasibility. Mm-hmm. And so, but data seems to be behind all of this. That sounds like a bit of a cliche, but is what you're getting at, that you have to be able to use and manipulate the data in the right way in order to deliver those results, in order to create a stable and efficient delivery network. So is this a move away from sort of like a gut feel kind of style of management towards a data information-based style of management?
Well, gut feeling is really how things are done today, because even though they have Excel sheets, there's always those expert discussions really, between the drivers operating the field and the guy in charge of making the decision. The guy who makes the decision, he has numbers, Excel sheets, and so on, so he can challenge and say, okay, the productivity here is too low, you should do better. But then the guy he discusses with will say, okay, I can't, because this specific part of the city is not that easy to serve, whatever reason. And so in the end, there is just a word against a word. Sometimes it's just the one that screams louder that wins the argument. And so no one is happy with a deal like that, right? You always have the feeling that the other one tried to push you onto something that you did not want. So the idea of the cool thing about data is that it's as close as you can get to actual facts, right? It's facts, and no one can discuss them. So this is really important to bring this to the table. And once it's there, you're not just discussing local stuff and tiny stuff. You focus on actual data, and when at Kardinal we have the capacity to say, okay, this zip code, it should be done by 2 tours, split like this, and you can see the volumes, you can see the kilometers, you can see the predictive working time that would be the consequence of this kind of organization. Well, everything is factual, and then they can make an agreement, they can define the right price, they can move on. At Kardinal, we play the role of a trusted third party that will bring factual numbers about what the optimal organization should be, and then discussion can happen and around those numbers. And so making a decision that they both agree on is much easier in this context.
And it's interesting when you're talking about using data to take the heat out of discussions as well. Mm-hmm. Anybody who's got experience managing delivery networks will know exactly what you're talking about there. And so this idea of sharing the data to lead to optimal outcomes, I think, is important, because what are we often talking about in parcel delivery is not just delivering on time and making the customer happy. It's also that you have to make money. Mm-hmm. Right. So let's just talk about this idea then of optimizing the delivery area. So we've talked about the balance between keeping costs low and having a price that's attractive to the contractor. Let's just talk about optimizing then. Is optimizing a delivery area part of this idea of having a healthy relationship with your delivery drivers?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a paradox here, because especially when you're working with subcontractors, right, the main recurring business model we find is that they are paid per delivered parcel, right? There are tiny variations around that concept, but that's really how things works. And so the core idea behind this business model is to say, okay, it's up to the subcontractor to optimize its resources to make a living out of this price per parcel. But what if they can't? And actually they can't, right? That's why we have so many subcontractors going bankrupt every month. I had the numbers for France, but it was really huge. I think it's time span of the average lifespan of a parcel delivery contractor in France is 3 to 4 years at best. So they start, they try, they fail, and it's really and for most of them it's shorter than this, right? So they can't make a living out of this, and the only way for them to make a living out of this price per parcel, that is not something the parcel delivery company can play a lot with, right? It's a number, it can't go too high because at some point they'll start to lose money as well, right? You probably know that last mile part accounts for at least around half of the total transportation cost, and so you don't have that much margin to play with the price. And so the only way for a subcontractor to be efficient is to be productive enough to generate as much money with the fewest drivers possible. But then if you do this, and some of them are doing this without being really optimized, you have other issues arising. People making very long shifts, and so they get tired very, very fast. And one of the reasons for subcontractors going bankrupt is the fact that internally they struggle to recruit, because driver shortage is an even harder problem to solve here. The numbers in Europe are really high. The amount of unfilled truck driver positions in Europe increased by 41% in 2021 versus 2020. So having good drivers is really a huge pain right now. By making routes optimal and humanly feasible, that's the only way for subcontractors to be efficient. But then it's kind of that's where the paradox arises, because when you do this, you kind of I would say do their job in their state, right? And so there is something the market is trying to solve here. It will take some years. We see some big parcel delivery companies trying to internalize some very hard to deliver areas to get really control about what the drivers do, because they know that a subcontractor on his own cannot be efficient. So they try to find solutions internally, and there are probably something to be found in a hybrid model where easy parts of the network are done by subcontractors, and the hardest ones may be performed by internal drivers over which you have more control.
When we're talking about optimization, I suppose one of those benefits, apart from just pure cost, there should be less fuel consumed, less kilometers driven, and therefore improved productivity.
Yeah.
And it's just for this, if you have employees, it's the same for those subcontractors. Is that what you're getting at also when you're talking about the length of shifts and being able to manage the shift length and making it all humanly possible?
Yeah, shift length is very important if you want, because it allows you to keep your drivers longer, right? They get they're less exhausted at the end of the day. They also deliver much more quality, right? That's something we observed on the field. If the amount of parcels he has to deliver can be done really in 8 hours, let's say, he's taking the time to call the person 2 times to actually make the delivery. And if he doesn't have the time, you probably experienced that yourself. The guy doesn't even call, or he just throw it out, and you're not happy with the delivery. So quality of service is the direct consequence of overloaded drivers, right? That's something that it's important to control, and fuel is also very important, especially right now. I think the diesel cost in transportation rose up from 40% to 50% in a year due to the recent surges in fuel costs. So fuel is also very important. So having control over shift duration and kilometers traveled is really key to productivity, because being productive is one thing, but you should. It's also regarding the cost, right? So how much does it cost the subcontractor to deliver one parcel on average? That's really the thing, the key number you need to get to. So then you can put a price on this to make sure that this price is as low as possible when you are a parcel delivery company, but high enough for him to grant a profitability on the long run.
And I understand we've got a case study that you can share to talk about how all of this works in practice. So what can you share?
Well, we've been working with DPD in France for 2 years now, I think. So what we did with them is that we deployed our territory analytics and optimization solution across the whole country. So now every 72 agencies that are collecting and delivering parcels in France are now equipped with our product. And our product does just this. I mean, we take historical data. We have very advanced algorithm based on even more advanced mathematics to provide optimal recommendations on how to organize the territory optimally. And so it works quite well. And key feedbacks I would take out of this use case are, the first one is that, but we already discussed the fact that those conflictual meetings between DPD and subcontractors were quite a recurring thing there. And now most of the agency managers we talk to, they say to us that they both use the product, right? Them and the subcontractor they arrange a meeting and they work on the product to define the optimal way to serve the area, and that's how they define the price now. And so that's a huge change for them because they both leave the room happy, while before they were just leaving the room with at least one that is unhappy and sometimes both. That's the most important. And now, I cannot officially share numbers about the result across the whole network, but what I can say is that for the most impressive cases we observed is that in some agencies there was some deep inefficiencies, local inefficiencies due to a subcontractor that has been there for ages and that is, for example, going to retirement and so on. So no one knows how to serve this area anymore because there has been 3 agency managers during the lifespan of this old subcontractor. So they had a lot of issues like this. And when they used the product and they used our algorithm to challenge this, we had productivity improvements up to 25% in some cases, which is really huge. I mean, they were not thinking it was possible to create that kind of improvement. Of course, it's not always the case. In some parts, it's already quite well optimized, and we bring to the table some changes. We do not reduce the number of drivers, but we kind of find a new balance of work between them. So there is less turnover and so on because the tools are more equilibrated, I would say. But in some of the parts of those agencies, we bring tremendous gains in terms of productivity.
It's not something we often talk about, is it? The human interactions. When we talk about technology, we talk about data. We talk about understanding the data, gleaning insights from the data. And very seldom do we talk about the human aspect of this. So there will ultimately be 2 humans have to sit in a room and discuss this, and hopefully not come to blows ultimately.
Yeah, that's really right. And as a AI and data product provider, we need to remain very humble regarding this, because whatever fancy algorithm you can come out with, in the end, if there is no one to make a decision supported by the data or the insights you bring, well, there is no value on the field, right? So in the end, the only thing that matters is that someone believes in what your algorithm tells enough to make a decision based on this. And that's the most critical part. And it's not specific to the logistics industry. It's everywhere like that. At some point, some guys on the field has to do things differently than what he would have done without you. And that's where most of the difficulty comes from. And so, ultimately, it's 2 guys or 2 people, I would say, discussing in a room and making a better decision thanks to you. And that's the hardest part of the job, yeah.
Now, everybody who's listened to this probably wants to find out more about how to optimize, how to reduce conflict and all of that using data and the tools that Kardinal has to offer. Cédric, how should people get in contact or find out more?
Well, you can obviously reach out through the website, so cardinal.ai. But we're also very present on LinkedIn, so and you'll find us very easily. So it's Kardinal with a K. So
cardinal.ai, it's Kardinal with a K, or check them out on LinkedIn. That's LinkedIn with a K as well.
As well.
Everybody, Kardinal.ai. Cédric, a fascinating conversation talking about everything from the computer side of things to the human side of things. So lots for us to think about there. Cédric Hervet, Chief Product Officer at Kardinal. Thank you very much for joining us on the Postal Hub podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Coming soon on the Postal Hub podcast, our friends from Omnic return to talk about parcel lockers. We've got the CEO of Seapost International, Thomas Roggendorf, tells us what's been happening in the Caribbean. Where's the Caribbean? Answers on a postcard. Well, anyway, what's been happening in Curaçao with regards to how they are transforming the post there. And we've got Johan Peters joining us as well in the coming weeks to talk about green urban logistics. Don't miss any of these great episodes. Subscribe to the podcast. Subscribe in your podcast platform. And then when you're subscribing, please do leave a review. You can subscribe to my email newsletter, which comes out each week when I launch a new episode. So it goes straight to your inbox. What else goes straight to your inbox is the Daily Delivery Digest. Go to thepostalhub.com and you can sign up for both of these newsletters there. If you're on LinkedIn, you can follow me on LinkedIn. Please do. I post all kinds of interesting stuff during the week. So follow me there. Just look for Ian Kerr. And what else should I usually say? Yes, the email address. Remember, if you want to contact me, email's the best way. Email me at ian@thepostalhub.com. I'm Ian Kerr. Thanks for listening in. I look forward to your company next time on the Postal Hub podcast.